I never planned to move back to the countryside. My life in the city had been everything I had dreamed about since childhood, fast-paced, exciting, filled with opportunity. But dreams can shatter. Mine did when I lost both my job and my 5-year relationship in the span of 2 devastating weeks. With nowhere else to turn and rent due, I called the one person who had always been my safety net, Uncle Mike. "Stay as long as you need," he said in that reassuring voice that had calmed me since childhood. "The guest room is always yours." Uncle Mike lived alone in a modest house nestled among towering pine trees, separated from the nearest neighbor by a bubbling creek and acres of undeveloped woodland. The property had been in our family for generations. It was the kind of place where cell phone reception was spotty, and the closest grocery store was 15 minutes away. Perfect for healing a broken heart and rebuilding a shattered career. The first thing that struck me upon arrival was the bridge. Unlike the modern concrete structures I had grown accustomed to in the city, this bridge was handcrafted entirely from timber harvested from the surrounding forest. Uncle Mike had built it decades ago, each plank hand-selected and treated with a mixture he had created himself. The railings curved gracefully, polished to a honey-gold shine from years of hands running along them. It spanned approximately 30 feet across the creek, connecting his property to the gravel access road beyond. "That bridge is special," Uncle Mike told me on my first night there. We sat on his porch, the moon casting silver light across the yard. He sipped his tea thoughtfully. "More important than it looks, actually. It is federally protected." I raised an eyebrow, wondering why a simple bridge on private property would have federal protection. Uncle Mike, however, changed the subject before I could ask. That was his way, quiet, reserved, sharing information only when necessary. 2 weeks into my stay, I noticed something unusual while driving back from a job interview. New signs had appeared at the entrance to the private gravel road leading to Uncle Mike's property. Bold letters proclaimed, "Pinewood Estates HOA, members only." I frowned. Since when did this rural area have a homeowners association? "They cannot do that," Uncle Mike said flatly when I showed him a photo of the sign. "This is a county easement road. They have absolutely no authority here." The next morning, we received our first letter. The envelope featured an official-looking logo, a pine tree encircled by the words Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association. Inside was a formal notice claiming our bridge was unsafe and unsanctioned, and needed immediate inspection. The letter was signed by someone named Cheryl Henderson, HOA president. Uncle Mike read it once, then dropped it into his recycling bin. "They are bluffing," he said with unusual finality in his voice. "That bridge has been here for 45 years. It is not going anywhere." But something in his eyes betrayed concern. Not fear, exactly, but awareness, like a chess player recognizing an opponent's opening move. The letters continued to arrive, each more demanding than the last. I grew increasingly worried, especially when I noticed strangers with clipboards and cameras examining our bridge from the road. One afternoon, I spotted a man in a reflective vest taking photographs from various angles. When I approached him, he hurried back to his vehicle without explanation. "Uncle Mike," I said that evening, "I think we should take these threats seriously. Those people taking pictures today did not look like they were just admiring your craftsmanship." He nodded slowly, his weathered hands folded on the kitchen table. "I know," he replied, "but trust me when I say they have no legal standing. That bridge is protected." I wanted to believe him, but something about the whole situation felt wrong. The determination in the stranger's eyes, the increasingly threatening tone of the letters, something larger was happening, something we were not fully prepared for. Why do they care so much about a wooden bridge? I asked. Uncle Mike gazed out the window toward the structure that had stood strong through decades of seasons. Because control is addictive, he said softly, and some people cannot stand knowing something exists outside their authority. That night, as rain pattered gently against the roof, I saw Uncle Mike through the office window, poring over old documents by lamplight. Whatever was coming, I realized, had roots far deeper than I understood, and those roots were about to be violently exposed. The truth about the HOA invasion came to light gradually, like a slow-moving storm. Through conversations with neighbors and some digging at the county records office, we discovered that Pinewood Estates, a new luxury development a mile down the road, had managed to extend its boundaries through an obscure county zoning loophole. Their homeowners association, eager to expand its influence and collection capabilities, had quietly redrawn their jurisdiction maps to include several previously independent properties, including the access road to Uncle Mike's land. They cannot legally include us, Uncle Mike explained while reviewing the county map spread across his dining table. Our property is explicitly excluded from their development plan. This is simply intimidation. Despite his confidence, the situation escalated. A notice arrived announcing a mandatory community meeting to discuss infrastructure safety concerns. Uncle Mike refused to attend. Acknowledging their authority gives them power, he said firmly. We do not answer to them. His defiance must have struck a nerve. 3 days later, a silver SUV rolled up our driveway, stopping just short of the bridge. A woman emerged, dressed in a blazer despite the summer heat, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. She walked with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting her way. "Mike Anderson," she called, approaching the porch where we sat. "I am Cheryl Henderson, president of Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association." Uncle Mike stood slowly, his manner deliberately unhurried. "You are trespassing on private property, Ms. Henderson." Her smile remained fixed, unnatural. "I would not have to come in person if you had attended our mandatory meeting. We have serious safety concerns about that bridge structure. It crosses HOA-maintained land and does not meet our community standards." "This is not HOA land," I interjected, unable to contain myself. "The county easement clearly states." "Young lady," she interrupted, "I have been managing community associations for 15 years. I know exactly what the documents say and what they mean." She turned back to Mike. "That bridge needs to be professionally inspected and brought up to code, or it needs to come down. Those are your options." Uncle Mike regarded her calmly. "I believe you should leave now." "You have 30 days to comply," she stated, placing a formal notice on our porch railing. "After that, we will take necessary action to ensure community safety." After she left, I retrieved the county maps and easement documents I had collected. The boundaries were clear. The creek and bridge sat entirely within Mike's property lines, with a protected easement for access. "She is lying," I said, pointing to the official survey markers. "The HOA has absolutely no jurisdiction here." Uncle Mike nodded. "Of course she is lying. This is not about safety or jurisdiction. This is about power." 2 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived marked "Final Notice" in bold red letters. It contained a formal demolition warning, claiming our non-compliant structure presented imminent danger to community members and would be removed within 7 days if we did not take action. I felt my pulse quicken as I read the document. They cannot actually do this, can they? Legally destroy our property. Uncle Mike took the notice, reading it carefully. His face remained impassive, but I noticed his hand trembling slightly. "They should not be able to, no," he replied. "But people with clipboards and official-looking documents can get away with remarkable overreach if no one stops them." That evening, I caught Uncle Mike making several phone calls from his study, speaking too quietly for me to hear. When I asked who he had called, he simply said, "Old colleagues, just checking some facts." Something about his manner bothered me. For someone facing the destruction of a bridge he clearly cherished, he seemed oddly reserved. Not unconcerned, but deliberately measured, like someone carefully considering his next move. "Why not just fight them directly?" I asked. "Get a lawyer, file an injunction, something to stop them immediately." He regarded me thoughtfully. "Sometimes," he said, "it is better to let people reveal the full extent of their intentions before responding." His words left me uneasy. I could not shake the feeling that Uncle Mike was keeping something from me, something important about himself, about the bridge, about why this quiet man seemed so certain yet so reluctant to act against such blatant overreach. The following morning, I spotted Cheryl's SUV parked near our access road. She was speaking with two men in construction company polo shirts, pointing repeatedly toward our bridge. My stomach tightened with dread. Whatever was coming, it was coming soon, and it would not be pretty. The assault began at dawn. I awoke to the low rumble of heavy machinery, a sound so out of place in our peaceful woodland that it jolted me from sleep with instant alarm. Through my bedroom window, the first golden rays of morning illuminated an unthinkable scene. 3 yellow bulldozers, 2 dump trucks, and a crew of workers in safety vests gathering at the head of our bridge. "Uncle Mike," I shouted, racing down the hallway to his room. "They are here, they are actually here with machines." By the time we rushed outside, still in our sleepwear, the workers had already set up traffic cones and caution tape. A man in a white hard hat supervised as crew members unloaded metal chains and hydraulic equipment. Uncle Mike strode forward with remarkable speed for his age, his pajamas and robe flapping in the morning breeze. "Stop immediately," he commanded with unexpected authority. "You have no legal right to be on this property." The foreman approached, clipboard in hand. "Sir, we have orders to remove an unsafe structure." He held out a document. "Emergency demolition order signed by the Pinewood Estates HOA Board and County Code Enforcement." I grabbed my phone from my pocket and began recording, capturing every detail of the confrontation. "That document is fraudulent," Uncle Mike stated firmly. "This bridge is on private property and protected by federal designation. I am calling the sheriff immediately." The foreman looked genuinely uncomfortable but shook his head. "I am just doing my job, sir. We have proper authorization." He gestured to his crew. "Continue preparation." Uncle Mike pulled out his phone and dialed the sheriff's office, but I could see in his eyes that he knew help would arrive too late. The machinery was already positioning. The workers moved with practiced efficiency, attaching chains to the support beams of the bridge. "Please," I begged the foreman, "at least wait for the sheriff to arrive. This is illegal destruction of private property." He averted his eyes. "Orders are orders, miss. We were told this needed to happen today, no exceptions." From the corner of my eye, I spotted a familiar silver SUV parked just beyond the work zone. Cheryl Henderson stood beside it, arms crossed, watching the proceedings with evident satisfaction. When she noticed me filming, she turned away, pretending to examine documents in her hand. The first bulldozer roared to life. Its massive metal blade approached the bridge entrance, while workers secured chains to the main support beams. Uncle Mike stood at the edge of our property, phone still pressed to his ear, as the destruction of his creation began before his eyes. The sound was horrific, cracking wood, snapping cables, the groan of timbers that had stood firm for almost half a century. The bridge did not surrender easily. Each beam fought against the chains, each plank splintered with reluctance. I continued recording, tears streaming down my face, documenting every moment of the desecration. The workers avoided eye contact, focusing mechanically on their task. Then came the moment that would haunt me. As the central support beam finally gave way with a sound like thunder, Uncle Mike dropped to his knees. His phone slipped from his fingers. His face, always so composed and dignified, crumpled in an expression of pure grief. He pressed his hands into the soil, fingers digging into the earth as if seeking anchorage while his world collapsed. This was not anger I witnessed. This was something deeper, the kind of soul-deep mourning one reserves for the loss of something irreplaceable, something sacred. The destruction took less than 40 minutes. Where our beautiful handcrafted bridge had stood now lay a jumble of splintered wood and broken supports. The creek water flowed around the debris, already adapting to the new reality. As the workers packed up their equipment, the foreman approached with a document. "You will need to sign this acknowledging the removal," he said, not meeting Uncle Mike's eyes. Uncle Mike, now standing again but looking 10 years older, did not take the clipboard. "I will sign nothing," he said, his voice low but unwavering. The crew departed quickly, leaving silence in their wake. Only after the last truck disappeared did I notice the sign they had installed at the former bridge site. "Unsafe structure successfully removed by order of Pinewood Estates HOA. No trespassing." Cheryl's SUV lingered momentarily. Through the window, I caught her triumphant expression as she surveyed the destruction before driving away. Uncle Mike stood motionless, staring at the wreckage. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I had never heard before. "They have no idea what they have just done," he said quietly. "No idea at all." Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine. It was not defeat I heard in those words. It was the calm, certain promise of consequence. The day after the demolition, Uncle Mike remained unusually quiet. He spent hours in his study, making phone calls in hushed tones and examining old files. I tried to give him space, understanding that the destruction of something he had built with his own hands must be devastating. But questions burned inside me. Why had he not fought harder to prevent this? Why had he seemed almost resigned to letting it happen? That evening, as rain pelted against the windows, he finally called me into his study. The room looked different. Boxes of documents had been retrieved from storage, leather-bound volumes lined his desk, and his computer displayed legal databases I did not recognize. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "There are things I need to tell you, things I should have explained sooner." I sat, heart pounding with anticipation. "I have lived quietly here for a reason," he began, removing his reading glasses. "When I retired, I wanted peace. No attention, no recognition, just solitude and simplicity." He opened a drawer and removed an identification card I had never seen before. He slid it across the desk. "Before moving here, I served as a federal judge for 32 years. United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit." I stared at the ID card in disbelief. The man I had known my entire life as just Uncle Mike, the quiet gardener, the bridge builder, the man who avoided conflict, had been one of the most powerful legal authorities in the country. "The bridge," he continued, "was not just my personal project. 28 years ago, I presided over a landmark case involving historical preservation easements on private land. The case established important precedent for protecting historically significant structures, even on private property. He opened a thick binder containing official documents bearing federal seals. To demonstrate my belief in the ruling, I registered my own bridge as a historical artifact. It was one of the last hand-built timber bridges in the county, constructed using 19th-century techniques. The Federal Historical Preservation Office granted it protected status. That protection was recorded in county records and formally registered with the Department of the Interior. My mind reeled. Why did you not tell Cheryl and the HOA? Why did you not stop them? I tried discretion first, he replied. I hoped they would research property records properly before taking action. When they proceeded with threats, I could have revealed my background and the bridge's status, but that would only have prevented the symptom, not addressed the disease. He leaned forward, his eyes suddenly intense. What they did was not just an attack on my property. It was an illegal destruction of a federally protected historical structure. They did not just break local rules, they violated federal law. Understanding dawned on me. You wanted them to cross the line. He nodded slowly. I wanted documented evidence of their willful overreach. Had I stopped them beforehand with legal threats, they would have retreated temporarily, then found another way to exert control. This community needs more than a temporary solution. It needs a permanent correction. That night, I discovered just how methodical Uncle Mike had been. He showed me the security cameras he had installed around the property months earlier, cameras that had captured every moment of the demolition from multiple angles. He had records of every communication from the HOA, every threatened action, every false claim. Most importantly, he had documentation proving they had been informed of the bridge's protected status through county records, which they had deliberately ignored. They believed they were untouchable, he said, sorting through files with practiced precision. People like Cheryl Henderson count on intimidation working. They count on regular citizens backing down rather than fighting expensive legal battles. While we talked, I checked social media and found Cheryl already gloating about her victory. A post on the Pinewood Estates community page showed a photo of our demolished bridge with the caption, "Successfully enforced compliance with community standards today. This is why strong HOA leadership matters." The comments section overflowed with congratulations from board members, completely unaware of the legal storm brewing. "What happens now?" I asked. Uncle Mike's expression revealed a determination I had never seen before. "Now we prepare. I have contacted former colleagues in the federal court system. I have notified the Historical Preservation Office about the illegal destruction." He closed the binder with quiet finality. "I tried to live in peace," he said, "but sometimes justice requires action." They believed they were punishing a defenseless old man. They had no idea they were provoking a federal judge with 32 years of experience in constitutional law and historical preservation statutes. For the first time since the demolition, I felt a surge of hope. The game had changed entirely. Cheryl Henderson and her HOA board had no idea what was coming. The public reckoning began with a single video post. Taking the footage I had recorded during the demolition, I created a 5-minute compilation showing the entire destruction process. I added captions explaining the bridge's historical significance, its federal protection status, and how the HOA had knowingly violated federal law. The title was simple but powerful. HOA illegally destroys federally protected historical bridge built by retired judge. I posted it everywhere, community forums, Reddit, Facebook groups dedicated to HOA overreach. By morning, it had thousands of shares. Local news stations called by noon. By evening, 2 vans with satellite dishes parked at the end of our driveway. Uncle Mike, initially reluctant to appear on camera, finally agreed to a single interview with the condition that they focus on the legal issues rather than personal drama. On camera, he was transformed. The quiet, unassuming man I knew spoke with the measured clarity and authority of someone accustomed to being heard in courtrooms. He did not raise his voice or show anger. He simply laid out facts with devastating precision. The bridge was registered under the historic American engineering record, he explained to the reporter. Its destruction was not just a property dispute. It was an illegal action against a protected historical artifact, done with full knowledge of its status. The story exploded. National news picked it up under headlines like HOA bulldozes history and power-hungry association destroys federal judge's protected property. Cheryl Henderson and the HOA board went completely silent. Their community Facebook page disabled comments after being flooded with outrage. Their monthly meeting was abruptly canceled without explanation. Meanwhile, Uncle Mike methodically built his case. He did not rush or appear vengeful. He simply gathered evidence with the thoroughness of someone who had spent decades in the legal system. The community response was extraordinary. Neighbors we hardly knew stopped by to express support. One elderly woman brought homemade bread and tears in her eyes. "They tried to make me paint my door a different color last month," she confessed. "I was too afraid to fight back." Most valuable was Thomas Greenwood, a Pinewood Estates resident who served as the HOA board secretary. Disgusted by what had happened, he provided us with internal emails proving the board had discussed the bridge's protected status, but chose to proceed with demolition anyway. Cheryl said, and I quote, "Federal designation means nothing without enforcement," Thomas told us, handing over printed copies of the exchanges. She believed no one would actually follow through with consequences. A local preservationist named Eleanor Wells contacted us, offering expert testimony about the bridge's historical significance. She had documented similar structures throughout the state and considered Uncle Mike's bridge an irreplaceable example of traditional craftsmanship. Uncle Mike accepted these offers of support graciously, but remained focused on his legal strategy. Each night, I would find him working late, preparing documents with the same care he had once devoted to crafting his bridge. "The court of public opinion matters," he told me when I showed him how widely our story had spread online. "But the actual court matters more. Cheryl Henderson needs to understand that actions have consequences." The pressure continued to build. County commissioners called an emergency meeting to discuss the HOA's jurisdiction claims. The Historical Preservation Society issued a formal condemnation. 3 HOA board members quietly resigned, distancing themselves from Cheryl's decisions. Through it all, Uncle Mike maintained his dignity. He never engaged in personal attacks or vengeance-seeking rhetoric. He simply kept building his case, piece by piece, with the patience of someone who understood that true justice required both passion and precision. As we prepared for the coming legal battle, I realized something profound had changed in our quiet community. People were standing taller, speaking more boldly. The reign of intimidation was ending, plank by splintered plank. The federal courthouse stood like a monument to justice, tall columns, broad steps, imposing doors designed to make ordinary citizens feel the weight of law upon entering. But Uncle Mike walked through those doors like he was coming home. Heads turned as we passed. Court officers nodded respectfully. A few attorneys stopped mid-conversation, recognizing the former judge returning to the arena he had once commanded. We had filed a federal lawsuit citing willful destruction of a federally protected historical structure, trespassing, property damage, and violation of multiple preservation statutes. The case had been fast-tracked due to its constitutional implications regarding property rights and federal protections. Cheryl Henderson and the HOA board members sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, their attorneys looking increasingly uncomfortable as they reviewed the evidence mounted against them. Cheryl maintained her composure, though her frequent glances at her phone betrayed her nervousness. When Judge Raymond Wilkins entered the courtroom, something remarkable happened. He paused upon seeing Uncle Mike, then stepped down from the bench to shake his hand. "Judge Anderson," he said warmly, "it has been too long. I remember clerking for you during the Harriman preservation case." That moment changed everything. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted perceptibly. This was not just any plaintiff. This was one of their own, a respected member of the very institution that would decide this case. The proceedings began with our attorney presenting the evidence: security footage, documentation of the bridge's historical designation, internal HOA emails revealing their knowledge of its protected status, and expert testimony from preservation specialists. When Cheryl took the stand, her carefully constructed facade began to crumble under precise questioning. "Ms. Henderson, did you receive notice that the bridge was federally protected under the historic American engineering record?" our attorney asked. "We received conflicting information," she replied evasively. "Please answer yes or no. Did you receive documentation regarding its protected status?" After a long pause, "Yes." "And did you proceed with demolition despite this knowledge?" "We had safety concerns that superseded." "Yes or no, Ms. Henderson?" "Yes," she finally admitted. The questioning continued, systematically exposing each falsehood. When presented with her own email stating, "No retired nobody is going to stop our community standards with fake historical claims," she visibly paled. The most damning moment came when the HOA's insurance representative took the stand and stated clearly that their policy would not cover damages resulting from knowingly illegal actions. "The HOA acted against explicit legal advice from our risk management department," he testified. "We specifically warned against this action." Throughout the proceedings, Uncle Mike sat quietly beside me, his expression revealing nothing. But I could feel a certain energy emanating from him, not vengeance but vindication. Judge Wilkins delivered his ruling with unmistakable clarity. The HOA had violated federal law. They had knowingly destroyed protected property. The penalties would be severe. The HOA was ordered to pay for complete restoration of the bridge by historical craftsmen, plus $1.2 million in damages for willful destruction of a protected structure. Additionally, they were required to issue a public apology in all local newspapers and community forums. Most significantly, the court placed the HOA under 3 years of federal supervision, requiring approval for any enforcement actions against residents. As we left the courthouse, reporters gathered on the steps. Uncle Mike answered their questions with characteristic restraint, focusing on principles rather than personalities. Later that evening, we learned that Cheryl Henderson had resigned from the HOA board effective immediately. Her parting email, leaked by a sympathetic board member, contained just one line: "Sometimes the cost of being right is too high." Uncle Mike read the news with quiet satisfaction. "It was never about her," he said, putting down his reading glasses. "It was about checking unchecked power, about reminding people that rules exist to protect everyone, not just those who write them. That night, standing where our bridge had once connected two shores, I understood that we had built something even stronger than what had been destroyed. Spring arrived with a chorus of birdsong and the sweet scent of new beginnings. 6 months had passed since the courtroom victory, and our property had become the center of an unexpected community renaissance. What began as a legal battle had transformed into something more profound, a restoration of both wood and trust. The rebuilding of the bridge commenced with meticulous care. The court had ordered not just replacement but authentic historical reconstruction. Master craftsmen from across the country, specialists in 19th-century bridge-building techniques, arrived with traditional tools and reverence for the task ahead. They worked under Uncle Mike's watchful guidance, referring to his original plans and incorporating his knowledge of traditional joinery methods. Most remarkably, volunteers from throughout the county joined the effort. Families arrived on weekends, bringing food and offering labor. Children learned to sand wood properly. Teenagers helped measure and mark timber. Even several Pinewood Estates residents participated, eager to distance themselves from the previous administration's actions. I never wanted to move somewhere with that kind of reputation, one new homeowner told me as he helped apply natural preservative to freshly cut planks. We are reclaiming what community actually means. The new HOA board, elected after a complete leadership overhaul, approached Uncle Mike with humble respect. Their first official act had been publishing a full-page apology in the county newspaper, acknowledging the illegal destruction and pledging a new era of respectful governance. Cheryl Henderson had moved away shortly after the court ruling. Her name was rarely mentioned, though when it was, it carried the weight of a cautionary tale. Pulling a Cheryl had become local shorthand for overstepping authority. As the bridge took shape once more, its significance deepened. This was no longer just Uncle Mike's bridge. It was a monument to standing firm against injustice. Each carefully fitted beam represented something larger than itself. On a warm Saturday in late April, we prepared for the official reopening ceremony. A bronze plaque had been created for the occasion, to be permanently mounted at the bridge entrance. It read, "The Anderson Bridge. Built 1977, destroyed 2024, restored 2025. A federally protected historical structure. Justice like this bridge connects divided shores. Honorable Michael J. Anderson, Federal Judge, Ret." The ceremony attracted hundreds of people, neighbors, community members, preservation enthusiasts, and even a representative from the Department of the Interior. News cameras captured the moment Uncle Mike, with steady hands, cut the ribbon stretched across the newly completed structure. His speech was characteristically brief but powerful. "This bridge," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "was always more than wood and nails. It was about connection, about history honored, about the right to exist undisturbed when causing no harm to others." He looked out at the gathered faces. "Today we cross once more, not in anger or triumph, but in peace and restoration." The following day, while most visitors had returned to their lives, I found Uncle Mike standing alone on the bridge at sunrise. His hand rested lightly on the smooth wooden railing, fingers tracing the grain he knew so intimately. "Are you glad you fought back?" I asked, joining him, "instead of just rebuilding quietly after they left?" He considered the question carefully, watching the creek water flow beneath us, continuous and unhurried. "Fighting was never the goal," he finally replied. "Justice was. Sometimes justice requires standing firm, speaking truth, and accepting the storm that follows." I stayed with Uncle Mike for another year after that day. The property that had been my emergency refuge became my chosen home. I found work nearby, helping document other historical structures throughout the county. The bridge stands stronger now than before, both physically and symbolically. Children cross it on their way to fish in the creek. Neighbors walk it to visit for evening conversations. Even strangers occasionally stop to read the plaque and feel the smooth wooden railings beneath their palms.